I believe that I've been a competitive athlete for 20 years. I don't want to beat you. I want to put my foot on your throat. And, so that's the way I've always been. I would say Michael did not have a big influence on my competitive nature.
The following is a production of Dirty Mo Media.
Hey guys, welcome to Action Detrimental. I'm Denny Hamlin, driver of the number 11 Sport Clips Toyota this past weekend in Chicago. And my co-host
is Jared Allen, wearer of Red Vest 311.
All right, where do we start with Chicago? Where can you possibly start, right?
I feel coming down here this morning more exhausted than any other weekend. I don't even know why.
To be the shortest race in quite some time, I don't know if it's in history or 50 laps. I can't recall another race being ever that short again, right?
Right.
We ran 50 or 60. I don't even know.
58, right?
58.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I barely ran all 58.
I was going to say, I didn't see you on TV.
I came down here and said, to be honest, Travis, I don't really know what happened in Denny's race yesterday. He's like, well, he wasn't even on TV at all.
I shouldn't have been. It was. I had like 3 laps of hero ball. Like when the track was actually fully dry on lap through lap 13 through 16. Top 3 fastest every lap, just hauling the mail. And then rain came again, and then I went right back to where I was in the 20s.
Why is it? What makes it rains like so difficult for you? Because you're good at like saving tires and the same kind of elements on other racetracks, but the rain just
it's way out of my element. I'm not sure. I can't find the limit on corner braking on entry. The minute I tried to push it is when you saw me turn around backwards in turn 6 and took, nearly just wiped the 47 clean out. I looked at his car after we got back straight again, and the left side of his bumper was bent down like 3 inches or something. It was big. I'm like, oh God, just crushed his race. And he just talked to me I was in my car during one of the rain delays. Well, the biggest rain delay kind of in the middle of the race there. He's like, so these conditions, where do you brake? Online, offline? I'm like, I don't know. And then he texted me after the race, said, I guess you should have broke offline. So I'm glad he got a good finish, and I didn't completely ruin the 47's day. But it all worked out in the end because at the end, the 2 car, again, 2 weeks in a row, he got me at the end. This one was a little different. It was interesting, though, and I haven't gone back and looked at it yet. But, I was still going to get, I was going to finish in the late teens, somewhere in that range. And then they said the 9 was behind you. And then I just got wiped out, like I wiped out the 47, and they said the 2 got you. I said, where'd he come from? He wasn't even in the picture. What you were telling me was behind me. So I talked to him after the race. He said he just kind of locked up his tires and, it knocked me into the 33 Austin Hill. So he was going to have a decent day as well. And, it just ping-ponged us right into the fence there.
It seemed like just utter chaos those last, 5 laps.
Yeah, and, what's kind of crappy to see, right, is it seems like ethics goes out the window a little bit. We saw it a little bit. Every corner, I kept gaining a spot because somebody would ship someone into the corner and just send them into the tire barriers. So, because they knew that the end was getting near, right? And I just wonder, is it really kind of worth it to do that? You're going to have some guys pissed off at you and whatnot. There's one thing of, making a mistake going in the corner. I made a mistake. The 2 made a mistake when he took us out at the end. But it's another, when I saw guys just deliberately knocking each other into the tire barriers, and it was like, man, that's just not a great look. I think I saw it again at the end with the 99 and the 9. It looked like the 99 was making a move on someone else, and the 9 knocked him into turn 11. And the 99 stayed close enough to the 9 where he's like, okay, you're going to see the checker flag, but you're not going to see it coming from the right direction. So he spun out the 9 in the last corner. So, yeah, it's tough. It's like, really, are those one spots worth it? I mean, it's just for every person, I guess it's probably a little different. But yeah, it just seems like the last few laps was very chaotic. And a lot of that came from the alternate tire strategies as well. There was 10 or 11 of us that had on wet tires. Everyone else pitted for slicks. So slick tires were really starting to come up to the front, with about 4 to 5 to go because the track had fully dried out. So that was, it was interesting, for sure. Poor Chicago and NASCAR can't catch a break with the weather. I was really looking forward to this thing in the dry. I felt pretty strong. This is 2 years in a row that in the dry I felt pretty good. I really felt like I had good speed. And then this comes, but just for the fans' sake and NASCAR's sake, it's like you never really, at least they got all the other stuff, before the race, the concerts and a lot of the activation that happened in the midway there. So it was good to see that at least got accomplished. Talked to Steve Phelps before the race. He's like, man, the one thing we don't want is lightning, right? Because then you're going to have to make everyone leave the premises and then come back in.
Right.
And he said they're just not going to come back in. So at least we didn't have the lightning. At least it was just rain. And yeah, we kind of saw a hybrid race, right? It was moments in the dry. I think total combined laps of full dry racetrack might have been 8 laps total. Other times it was damp, and then other times it was really, really wet. So just the changing conditions is what throws me for a loop, and no one hates sucking worse than I do. I'm trying to figure out, well, how can I fix it? I'm wondering, any of those who want to get into my mentions right now, let me know how iRacing's wet weather is, because I've seen, a lot of guys that race professionally racing in the wet weather on iRacing, and it seems like they think it's somewhat accurate. I just need something somewhat accurate, right? Because we can't simulate that in our world.
Your sim doesn't have it, the Toyota that you guys use?
No, it doesn't. And to make something work, it would just take so much work to do it. And it's again, you have to be smart with your resources, right? So you don't and I heard Chris Gabehart bring this up with Kevin Harvick I think it was a couple of weeks ago. He's like, when Kevin's like, well, what do you do with Denny in the wet now? Like, it's clearly a weakness. And he's like, I don't think we do anything. I think we focus on what we're good at versus trying to spend time and effort on trying to get better, right. At something that you're not. At this stage of my career, I would say. So, how many more wet weather tracks will we have over the next 3 to 4 years, right? Or whatever. Does the championship run through wet weather? Likely not, right? So I just think that it sucks because I'm getting finishes right now. I don't know. I don't know how much effort to really put into it to get better. There's clearly, a handful of guys that are very, very, very good at it. And so I at least have information from them that I can study to try to get better. But it's just finding the limit. Like I look at it and I study SMT and I'm like, okay, I'm just not pushing the corner entry quite hard enough. And then second I do, I'm 100 yards too deep and I'm backwards into Ricky Stenhouse.
Does the breaking point change each lap in each corner as the track continues to dry a little bit?
Yes, and that is the challenge, right? Is that it's so interesting. I just went back and I watched the race, and it's more clear on TV how dry the track is than it is inside the car. I can't see. It looks all wet to me. And so it's very interesting that it does change, right? And as drivers that are really good at it get used to, okay, here's how hard I can push it in the full wet. Here's how hard I push it in the damp. Here's how I'm identifying whether the track's dry or damp. Like, that's where I just really need to get better at and understanding. And I think it's more just asking a lot of questions to my teammates versus, doing other things. So I think that, there's a lot of opportunity to get better there. It's just how much do I really want to invest in it?
Right. So is it a feel thing? Because I can't imagine that like Christopher Bell can see the track much better than you in those situations, right? So like, why is he better? Is he just feeling it more?
Could be. Yeah, it could be. Could be that he is feeling it quite a bit better. I feel comfortable that I'm on the limit of the tire and the grip mid corner out. Like, I feel like I'm getting all I can get there, but it's just the corner entry that I don't have good marks at quite yet. The problem was a little different for myself at New Hampshire. I felt like I did start making gains on corner entry, but then I tried to make the corner on the exit. My car just absolutely plowed to the fence. So I don't know. I think that was kind of 50-50 car and me on that one. But I just, man, it sucks to not be better at it because I feel like the slicker the conditions, the better off I would be. But it's just so different because I know if I carry it 100 feet deep or that's 100 feet too deep, I'm locking up and I'm nosing it in like Larson did.
We see rain more and more, I feel like, each year. And so couldn't you still, like, in the off season or find some time to devote a little bit of time so that, like, let's say this past weekend, if you would have finished, 15th, those points, that it ends up being a little more important maybe than.
No, listen, all races are equal in the sense of, like, what do they mean to the regular season? We only have a couple wet weather tracks left on our schedule. I think there's might be one or two. So I don't know. What am I going to be able to test? They won't. You can't test these cars. So you could test like a Trans Am car, which would probably be somewhat helpful. But yeah, then you're just trying to find a weekend somewhere that's going to be wet. So yeah, that's the challenge of it.
Looks like there's a 33% chance on Wednesday. So maybe Wednesday.
Go up to VIR. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. That's a place you could. I got to find a car and I got to find wet weather and then a coach.
It's interesting you say that, Travis, because it seems like, now that NASCAR continues to get better and better at racing in the rain, that this is going to be something for the up and coming generation to actually practice.
Yeah. And you see some of the best ones are some of the youngest guys, because they had that experience. And, I had heard Kevin Harvick say that, his son, that it used to be when it would rain, they'd be loading up on the trailer and going home. Now his son, they put on their wet driver suit, wet tires, and they continue to race. So yeah, it is certainly, an advantage to the younger generation starting to get more reps doing it right now.
How more difficult was it with visibility once the rain started coming down?
Well, yeah, that was sketchy. That one lap that we ran, that it was in full rain and the track was soaked, that was too much. It was spray. The good rule of thumb, right, is that NASCAR can use the camera at the end of the front straightaway. If that camera can only spot two cars, it's too wet. It's too wet. And so what happens is none of us could see nothing. I couldn't see where the corner was. I couldn't see anything. All I saw was blinking red lights. And I'm hoping those blinking red lights are going the right direction. And they're following someone else's blinking red light. So it's just, that was definitely too much. And it looks like the rule of thumb is if there's puddles on the track, literal puddles, it's too much. You can't do it because the spray is it's blinding.
It was funny. I was standing in the suite area during that big rain delay, and I think that's when they announced that the race would go until 8:20, or at least that's when
They announced the race at the beginning.
Okay, so maybe just word was getting around at that point, but someone had asked, they're having a conversation amongst themselves. Why are we going to 8:20? Aren't there enough like track lights out there? Isn't there like the lights on the streets of Chicago, and like don't these cars have headlights? I see lights on the rear of the cars. Like why can't they see?
It's just the visibility is tough, and especially at a street course like Chicago, there's just no room for error. There's no runoff like you would see at other tracks, and it just what would happen is the darker it gets, the more pronounced the strobe lights would be. Which actually they had us turn them off towards the end of the race because they are pretty blinding in normal conditions. So I think that it's just not possible. I looked, I had a good view from my hotel, kind of the straightaway from 6 to 7 there, and there were some orange street lights. There was, that's just not enough. It's not enough to run. It's unfortunate.
How dark was it at the end? Could you guys have gone longer, or was it getting pretty dark?
Yeah, we probably could have gone a few laps longer. But NASCAR, it's better to set a time from the beginning to let everyone know this is what we're up against, is this time right here. So I think that was the right call. It was what they intended. They made sure they made it very aware to all the crew chiefs, because the instance happened at Loudon, New Hampshire, where I know our crew chief messaged up to the tower saying, "Hey, when's your stop dead time? Like, it's getting dark. Give us an idea so we can work our strategy or have our urgency stepped up at the right time." And they were like, "It's TBD. It's going to be close whether they make it to the end." So I think from that point, teams reached out to NASCAR and says, "Just give us a time. Use." Nautical, whatever, daylight, and use that as your time, that at least we know what we're up against and we can plan accordingly. So
did this time that NASCAR set severely impact the team strategy like last year in Chicago, right? They were just like, okay, we're only racing to lap 80 now, and it kind of threw the strategy through a loop. Was this better?
Yes, this was better because the teams were planning for this well in advance. I think last year the problem was we got such short notice. Like I can't remember, but I just remember being caught off guard, saying, "Whoa, wait a minute! There's 5 laps to go." So I think that this certainly was better. I mean, I see. Do you then forego the end of stage 2 caution? Maybe. But then, you're starting to make up rules as you go. And I don't know. I think that they didn't need to change any more rules, especially mid-race for this one. I understand that we wanted to see more green flag racing. I totally get that, and I understand what the people want to see. But you have to keep the integrity of what, this race, and here's the rules we set forth, and changing them mid race is just it loses a little bit of legitimacy, in my opinion. So I think they did the right thing by throwing that caution, even though it's not the best for the show.
What about at the beginning, before the race starts, you announce the end time? Okay, we know it's going to be shortened, weather, no caution break or no stage breaks. Do it before the race starts and get rid of them.
Well, they didn't know that they were going to be up against the time, right? Because they weren't planning for that hour and a half break in the middle of the race, right? So had that not happened, then you would have got the full race distance in. I think this is probably more of a broader topic, Travis, on start times, right? I think that we are chasing ratings so much that we're trying to get in this perfect window, and it's just not allowing for these types of things to happen. We were one more, think about this, one more rain cell away, and it was close. One more rain cell away from being done at wherever we were at, lap
Yeah.
25, 30, whatever.
You hadn't even hit in the halfway mark at that point.
I know. So then what do? Just do like you did at Xfinity last year and say, well, we ran 15 laps. That's an official race. Like that's the thing. We had decent weather all day right up until 2:30, 3 o'clock. And so that's your prime time thunderstorm times of the day. And just what you hope, right, is that perhaps with the new partners coming in with Amazon and Turner, they're a little more flexible with, certainly Amazon will be, right? Because it doesn't matter about them hitting a live TV window. I've had these conversations with Amazon. They're not going to be limited pre and post race like others will, right? They want you to just keep it tuned in. So they're going to be more apt to be, I think, more flexible with their schedule than others that, have Chicago Fire coming up right after. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and so NBC had IndyCar before NASCAR yesterday, so moving it up probably was going to be difficult. Now, Amazon has the flexibility, but they still know what time does the best, so you wonder how willing are they to move up a whole lot, though?
I don't know. I just have a gut feeling that they're willing to be more flexible to avoid delays. That's what I would predict. So, I mean, again, if you had a magic wand and you didn't care about ratings as much, or hitting this perfect window, you would have started that race at 12 o'clock, right? I mean, the weather was, we're looking at the forecast. It was going to be fine until 3 o'clock when the race started. So you had an opportunity there to have a disruption-free race and one that, the fans could have enjoyed, a lot of green, no weather. So that in fact impacts your midways as well. The only thing that is a question, and again, I'm educated about 5% on how the show actually happens in Chicago, but I think, some of the workers there are kind of union workers as well. So getting them there early, I don't know how all that would work. So there's a lot of red tape that surely has to go into, making the decision to keep it where it's at. But, we rolled the dice. We had a wet weather package. We hoped for no lightning. We got no lightning. But these cars just cannot run in rain. That's the challenge. Rain is just no good. Damp, all good. Rain, no good.
You got to remember, too, that when it comes to the timing and start of the race, this is also a unique event in that the Chicago Street Course is not solely about the racing, right? They had concerts planned pre-race. Like, there's all these festivities to create this event for the fans that came to the track, that it wasn't strictly about the cars on track. That
That's
there was
right.
this other stuff.
Yeah, similar to F1 in that sense. I mean, it's very, very different than that. But, I got to, experience the one in Las Vegas. And, yeah, the race was just a very small part of the week I spent out there, right? It was all the parties, the hospitalities, things like that really made it fun. It was a social gathering, that's what, you saw here. This is a social gathering with a race.
Speaking of, did you notice one similarity between the Vegas F1 event and this race?
What?
Is it that paddock?
Yeah.
Very, very, very similar.
Yes, yeah, it is, and certainly, I mean, like F1's Paddock Club is on another level. It is really, really nice, but it is, I think that they did. I think Julie Gase, just props to her. She just did a phenomenal job with this whole Chicago race, and just everything that they did. She deserves a lot of credit for putting this on and doing it the right way. You saw extra hospitalities over in turn 7 to turn 8. We saw these buses and trailers with extra hospitality that were getting used. So there was one down the back stretch I saw as well. So yeah, they're certainly doing it right.
Going back to discussing should there have been stage breaks and whatnot, we actually, this race nearly played out the way you would have wanted it to, with the slick tire cars catching the leaders at the end of the race, to Tyler Reddick and Alex Bowman. Had there not been that Josh Berry caution that cut off 2 to 3 laps right there at the end.
Ifs and buts. Yeah, certainly. I thought that you heard radio transmission from I was part of the wet weather thing, tire guys. So we were going to fade no matter what anyway, because the track was drying pretty quickly. In retrospect, now that I'm looking at it. But yes, it was going to be close on wet weather tires holding up the distance with that track drying so quickly. So it was. You saw, I think I saw probably whenever that Josh Berry caution came out, it was
lap 51, I believe.
Okay, so 6 to go, roughly.
Yeah.
Like the top 11, 12, except for Seabell, were all wets. And then by the end of the race, they showed it when Tyler Reddick was running down Bowman. There was like a couple wet weather tires left in the top 10, and then everyone else had just faded. So it was such a hybrid situation where, one worked for the short time, one worked for the long time. And I think that's what kind of Goodyear's hoping that it's going to happen at Richmond, right, when they have that option tire here in the fall.
What'd you make of Reddick's trying to track him down and then hitting the wall there? Did you go back and see that?
I did. It's a bummer. I thought he was going to get there, especially as quickly as he was running him down. But yeah, fundamentals. Fundamentals is to finish first, you must first finish. And so I think it's just, he's going to be tough on himself, but he's trying everything he can. He's probably thinking at that point, he's got 2 more legit passing opportunities, right? He wasn't going to be close enough off of turn 5 where he hit the wall to get him into turn 6. So there was 2 more options, likely 2 options. One was going to be into turn 7, over the bridge and into turn 7. And the other one was going to be the very last corner, because you would think, well, there's another one in turn 11 there, but the bottom was wet and he was on slick tires, and that probably wasn't going to work unless he was willing to just clean Alex out. So I think that he probably panicked on, counting down passing opportunities left in this final lap, and he was down to 2.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, is that at the time, if there was really only one dry lane on the track, where was he going to go to pass Bowman?
Yeah, he could have held it tight enough. I looked, and the track was, if you held all the cars like right up against each other, I thought it was like 2.5 to 3 lanes wide of enough dry. But yeah, I mean, it would have been a fight for sure. The 48 likely would have kind of blocked and tried to keep them in the wet. But, the 45 was coming so quickly. I just think he was going to get there with a shot in the last few corners. But obviously didn't work out.
Was this progress, though, on NASCAR's part to let y'all decide if you wanted slick or wet tires? We talked about that with Loudon last week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago? The choice for the drivers.
Yeah, I certainly think that it was they're creeping into it, right? They're dipping their toes in it. And so, yeah, I thought that this was another step in the direction of, leaving it in the team's hands.
I want to go back to before the decision to get the slick tires. They pitted right before the end of the stage to ending, and it was because some other people went in first. Had Bell, Reddick, and those guys pitted a lap earlier and not been had their forced hand, do you think they would have been in a better position?
Yeah, I knew this question was coming, just mentally thinking about this. But I think people were still on the fence, and they were, right? The field split whether they were going to stay on the wets for the remaining 10 laps, or do you go ahead and pit, take your dries, and then really make a big charge? So I think that the track was still wet enough at the end of stage 2 that wet weather tires were the best. I think they were the best tires. Now, I think that's what the 20 and the 54 were on, but maybe not. But anyway, if they weren't, then they would have just stayed out. I think they were on wet, and then they switched to slicks at that point. So I think the field was still split. That's why you didn't see as many people jump the stage at the end of stage 2 as what you normally would, is that the field was still split on what the right choice was. Is just stay out on the wets for these last remaining laps or go to slicks. So
what goes into that decision? Because if you roughly know when the race is going to end and how many laps they'll be run, right? The engineers are trying to figure that out mathematically. What goes into that decision to switch to slicks or stay on wets? Because if Bell and the 54 car went to slicks because they thought that was the right move, you also had Bowman thinking, our only chance to win this race was to stay on wets.
That's right. Yeah, because they know if Bowman, we were in the same position, right? We had finished 10th on the stage because everyone else had pitted to jump the stage and then put the slick tires on for the end. That's what got us into the top 10 at the end of that stage. Well, at that point, if I come in and Chris puts me on slicks, I'm going to start 30th, and we've got 8 laps to go. So I think that the track was just wet enough where Chris was like, I think slicks is I think wets is the right play for you in this situation, but the track just dried rapidly at the very, very end, and clearly slicks were way, way faster.
And probably would have dried faster too had we not had caution laps, right?
Right. Yeah, it does. Certainly the heat from the tires and the exhaust and things like that definitely dry the track, pretty quickly. So, certainly without a caution, a caution takes up, it seems like 10 minutes. Like it just feels like, so 3 laps.
There was 3 laps for Barry.
So at probably 3 minutes, I'm guessing this is a guess, it takes us 3 minutes to get around the racetrack, maybe 4 under caution.
It was about...
So that's like 10, 12 minutes. So that's a lot of, that's, oh boy. It's like 6 or 7 more laps of green that you would have seen.
I think Reddick would have liked to have 6 more laps.
Yeah, I don't think he would have made that mistake in turn 5. He would have been a little more level-headed on, having enough time. If there was 6 to go, he was not going to cut that wall that close.
Did caution seem like they took a longer to get back to green? It did for me watching, but I don't.
A little bit, yeah. I don't know what all is going on in race control, what they're having to organize and whatnot. But it's, trust me, race control is a thankless job, and it's hard to get right all the time. But more than likely, they're trying to get this thing going as quick as possible because of the 58 racing laps that we ran yesterday, 30 were under green, maybe. That's a stretch, maybe. So it just didn't feel like a lot.
When you wreck, are you encouraged to get the car moving again in a timely manner? Like, does NASCAR go over that pre-race with you in the drivers' meeting?
Yeah.
Like, hey, we don't want to have to throw these cautions, these full course cautions. Get your car going. Yeah,
I tried to, and I had it going, but then I stalled it when I spun around, and then it would not refire. So. Yeah, we want to get it going because we know that NASCAR's not going to throw a caution in all likelihood. So, yeah, you're trying as a driver to get the thing going. And I thought everyone did a good job of getting it going when they could.
We had some drama in this race between drivers. I actually saw you, as you make your way out of the track, do here's Cindric. Let's have a talk with him up. Here's Austin Hill. Have a little talk with him. But the one that's taken over social media is Bubba and Bowman. Bowman getting into Bubba earlier in the race, which took him out of a top 10 running spot, and then Bubba making contact with him on the cool-down laps.
Yeah, I don't know how NASCAR is going to view it. So how this is different than, let's say, Carson Hocevar is that one is under yellow. And under yellow, that means that there's an unsafe condition and there are safety vehicles on the racetrack. At the end of the race, there are no safety vehicles on the racetrack, and it's not a unsafe condition. There's not a driver's safety issue. So I don't know how they'll view it. And the other also is that Carson spun someone under yellow, and it cost them positions and damaged their car. So that hurt Harrison Burton for the rest of the race. The race was over. He took a swipe at Bowman, and I think Bowman underplayed it a little bit in the media. But yeah, I don't know how they'll view it. I think that they could go either way with this, because it is different than wrecking someone under caution. While you try to draw, I think people that don't like Bubba will try to draw conclusions into it one way, and people that support Bubba will see it in an entirely different way. And I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. But certainly I think that they are different simply because of the safety aspect of being under caution versus being the end of the race. There's no safety vehicles out there. Everyone's running slow speeds. So I don't know where they go with this. He'll probably get a talking to, maybe get a fine or something, but that'd be all that I think comes of this.
Here's what Bowman said: NASCAR should not penalize Bubba. He barely hit me. Everything was fine, and it was plenty deserved.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bowman's taking the high road there.
It's easy when you just won.
Yeah, he's feeling good, and I think that he's taking the high road there, knowing that he made a mistake early on, and he's trying to repay that mistake through comments in the media. That would be my feeling and gut on it.
If anything, the optics don't help. They just handed down a fine for something similar, or at least that fans would look at.
Yeah, all of these things are judgment calls, right? I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, I got into the back of Larson under caution at Nashville, right? And we made contact with each other under caution. Most times, if you were there in the race and you're looking for something, you're going to find two drivers that are trying to send a message to each other under caution a lot of times. It's just sometimes the camera's on you, sometimes the camera's not. Most of the time the camera's not. The people only see where the camera's focused in that moment. And likely if it's someone in 20 something, they really don't care about that contact, and so they're not going to put it on TV. But this happens all the time, and especially after races as well. Yeah, you won't be able to find one race that somebody didn't go up and knock somebody sideways after the race was over to voice their displeasure. So it's very common. I don't agree with it, but I'm guilty of it as well.
Does 2311 send NASCAR any sort of stuff where you just wait to see the decision and then present reasons why there shouldn't be a fine or anything?
I think that it starts with a conversation, more than likely. Elton Sawyer, in this instance, would reach out to Bubba, have a conversation with him, have a conversation with Alex. That's typically how they say they want to do it. They didn't necessarily do that in mine and Ross's chase instance at Phoenix. They kind of just took our word for it here on the podcast. But they said typically what they want to do is if there's an incident involving two drivers, retaliation or what have you, they'll reach out to both parties to get the facts, and then they'll make a decision from there. So if anything, again, if they view this egregious, that's what they would do. That's a big if.
What do you make of the whole Chicago race weekend as a whole? How does NASCAR evaluate this week, considering last year was completely rained out, and then they had rain on Sunday this year? How do they evaluate Chicago? Was this a success? Is there momentum to build on for next year?
I think so. I think that the weekend is a success. It would be hard for me to argue, and again, I know 5% of it, but from the city's standpoint, how can you argue against that this is better for your economy? We go into a hotel that's kind of a little bit off the beaten path, and they said, let me guess, y'all are here for NASCAR. And we were like, yeah. And they were like, yep, everyone that's been checking in's here for NASCAR. And so that's good for the economy, right? It spurs the economy. And what are we all doing on Saturday? we're going shopping. And so, we're using the commerce to our, at our hand there, and we're giving back. And it's just, there are a lot of NASCAR fans there that we're visiting from other places that normally wouldn't go to Chicago, but it's a destination city, and it's got, their favorite sport participating in it. So they made the travel. So I think certainly it'd be interesting to see what is the economic impact of us coming to the city, because I believe it is a good thing for it.
For the city, but for NASCAR, are they getting what they wanted to get out of it?
I do. I think that this crowd is different than our normal NASCAR crowd that comes to, say, Darlington or what have you. I think, when I looked at the fans coming in the gates, it was a very diverse crowd. Ones that, were going to a NASCAR race for the very first time. When I went to the Toyota hospitality and did a Q&A, the fans, this was a different group, and a group that had not been exposed to NASCAR before. And so I think that's why they should deem it a positive. And it just takes a couple of them going to a race to enjoy it, to then latch on to the sport.
What about 2311? You talked about this being a race that 2311 treats as a home track because it's Chicago and the ties to Michael Jordan.
Yeah, certainly the activation that 2311 did was just second to none. I mean, our poor drivers, I tried to give them a shout out on social media, but then I talked to Tyler during one of our driver intro things, and he's like, man, I didn't mind it at all. Like, it was fun to me. The things we did were fun, and I'm like, man, that's what I like to hear, because we had him going from 7 a.m. in the morning to 7 at night, and so I think it was probably 8 or 9 total stops for both of our drivers just on Friday alone. And I said this privately to someone else, but I'll say it. This was kind of our frustration with NASCAR, and not necessarily NASCAR, but Jim France in general, that thinks that we just show up and put cars on a racetrack. Like, we're doing so much to grow our sport, but yet every negotiation that comes around, it's, well, we're not locking arms and we're not growing the sport together. And it's like, what do you think we're doing? Like, so it was really good to see, how much activation they did. And 2311 treating this as a home race for them, right? Our drivers put a lot of emphasis on it. Both drivers had a lot of speed throughout the entire weekend, and, nearly got the win.
I mean, yeah, you nearly had the Jumpman car in Victory Lane in Chicago.
Nearly. I know Tyler wanted it so bad. That's and like last year, I thought he was in control of the race when he drove it into the tire barriers in turn 6, but he just wants it bad, right? And so sometimes when you push the edge as much as he does, that's what makes you fast, and it also makes mistakes. So it's just part of racing. I
felt for him because he came in here last week and said, I finished second like 13 times or something, and now it's 14.
I know.
Dear Denny, for you. Brad Dougherty noted that he believes Michael Jordan's historic and well-documented competitiveness has influenced your competitiveness. What role do you believe he's genuinely had in your competitive evolution?
What a question. Well thought out. I believe that I've been a competitive for 20 years. I do. I've always been a fan of Michael's. It's really why I watched the NBA back in the 80s and 90s when I was much younger. It was just, we watched Michael Jordan games. That's the only time we watched basketball. If it was on primetime television and Michael Jordan was playing. So it wasn't until, like, when I say recently, like a decade or so ago, that we actually understood Michael's competitive nature, right? It's the documentaries that really, The Last Dance, that you're like, holy cow, he was a psycho when it comes to being competitive. And of course, social media just came about, in 2010 or 12. You got, Twitter comes along, and now people are starting to share stories, and Instagram comes along, and people are sharing their stories of their moments with Michael where he was very competitive, beyond basketball. And so it's just recently were we educated about this. I have been this way for all I can remember. I remember my grandmother used to have to just settle me down if I didn't win in putt-putt. I mean, it's interesting I say putt-putt because we did it with the Barstool guys this weekend. I just have been this asshole for a long time.
I mean, to paint a picture, you were leading this putt-putt game by, I don't know, 8 strokes or something, and Spider had gotten Taylor's and was like, hey, go mess with your dad and maybe help us out here, get us a couple strokes. So Taylor, Denny's going through his putt, and Taylor's like grabbing the putter or like making noise in the backswing. Denny's like, stop. Like he's up 8 strokes in putt-putt. It does not matter. There's nothing on the line. It's like, Taylor, knock it off.
I mean, I don't want to beat you. I want to put my foot on your throat. And, so that's the way I've always been. It's in my blood. I see it in Taylor as well. Like, she gets so frustrated when things, don't go her way. When she's being competitive, I see it when she plays basketball or other sports or what have you. I think is it a character flaw? Probably a little bit. But it also, I feel like, is what makes people great at wanting to be great in their specific, sport or their profession, right? Is if they are that person that is just over the top, cares about perfection, it makes them really good at what they do. But sometimes that character flaw comes up, and it's a negative when it comes to your interaction with others and things like that. So while I think that you can draw conclusions, to get back to the question, I would say Michael did not have a big influence on my competitive nature, but you have 2 owners at 2311 that are ultra competitive. And I can tell you, and you see it through the investment we're making in the sport, we want to win, and we want to do whatever it takes to win. We have to be smart with that because, again, this is my own money that I've made in the sport. I'm investing back into it, so I have to be smart with it. But I also, want to win, and I'm happy to see our team where it's at now, as one of the best two-car organizations out there, and competing with the big boys that have been around for decades each and every week now.
Do you think it's just being maybe highlighted more because you're still trying to get that championship and getting towards the end of your career, and so people think that you're racing differently or acting differently?
I mean, I certainly believe that here in the latter years, I'd say probably in the last couple of years, I've definitely been more selfish on the racetrack than I was early on, simply because I know that I'm now set a goal for myself, right? And I know that the sunset clock is ticking, right? And so there's that urgency.
There's 20 minutes left. 20 minutes left in the race.
Right. I'm cranking up that urgency to get there. And so sometimes through that, it makes us really, really good, and sometimes it makes us make mistakes. But I think that clock is going off a little bit, and so it's making me say, okay, well, how many more shots am I going to have at this? So I need to capitalize now. So I think that's kind of what shifted my mindset on how I race over the last few years.
Is that just a mindset all the time, or are you in positions in the race where you're like, you think about that and think, okay, I don't know how many more shots I am or going to have at this. Like, this is my chance to take it. Or is it just something that's turned on 24/7?
It's turned on 24/7. I can't turn it off. I am always thinking about what I need to do to win. I think about it when I lay my head on the pillow. I think about all the things, I mean, last night I'm thinking as I'm, trying to go to sleep, I'm thinking, what am I missing? Well, how can I get better in the wet? How can I hit my marks better? Like all those things can go through my mind constantly, and it consumes you, right? And sometimes when people around me don't understand why I'm so tired at times, it's because I'm mentally tired. I'm exhausted, mentally exhausted, because when you see the picture of the GIF of all the numbers going off in someone's head, right? And it's like that's what's going on in my head constantly. And so anytime I try to relax, it's like, oh, I'm exhausted. It's like, what physically did you do today that was tough? Nothing. I just had meetings, and those meetings spurred, intellect into, made me think about something else, and it was thought-provoking. And then I thought, well, how can I fix that? And how can this get better and that get better? So it just, it consumes me. And so it's why I think I will struggle with retirement one day, is that I'm constantly stimulated by wanting to get better in so many different aspects, wanting my team to be better, wanting all those things to be better, that what happens when I actually am off and I take a vacation, right? Am I going to be just so ultra bored? More than likely. I
mean, you already experienced that during COVID.
That's what made me start a race team.
This sucks. I'm going to make another career.
Right. It's what started 2311 was COVID. I was sitting around my pool on a Sunday afternoon thinking, surely this is not what retirement's like. Like, I can't do this.
And this is what people live for, Travis, sitting outside at his pool on Lake Norman.
I was going to say after this weekend, I'm like, man, I really could just live the life by the pool.
It'll happen one day, but I'm just, my competitive juices are flowing just too much right now to let it go.
I've got one Dear Denny question. So we had a race up against the clock yesterday. I found it entertaining to see how it was going to play out. Do you think NASCAR should ever have one race where, okay, you're racing to the clock and not to the lap?
Sure. Yeah, we could do that. Certainly it's very possible, right? Because it's so different because, F1 goes to a lap, right? Unless it goes long and then they go to a clock. Is that how
they have
goes?
they have a certain window that from the start of the race to the end it has to get done by.
Because these races are so impacted by caution flags. In F1, they don't have as many safety cars, right? So they don't have the 7, 8, 10 cautions that we have during some events. When our races go green, our races could be 2 hours and 20 minutes, or they can be 4 hours and 30 minutes for the same distance race, just depending on cautions, right? So that's why starting a little earlier gives you that window to get the thing in before we get closed in by darkness. But yeah, it could happen. And I think that this clock is definitely going to be a factor going forward, because with our start times or our published start times over the next 15 more weeks, we're going to be up against it again at some point. There's going to be a rain delay where we're going to be up against it. So this is not the last you're going to see or hear from it.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things too that NASCAR implements and that they'll go back to. Once there's a precedent set, they'll go back to it now.
I mean, when they had that clock up on the screen, I was locked in. I wasn't moving away from the TV.
Yeah, because you knew that we're going to see double zeros and then 2 to go.
Yeah.
Right. So, and what made it exciting too is that all of a sudden, TV caught on to it with about a lap and a half to go. They were like, because Bowman was the only car in the picture. And then all of a sudden you saw this car coming and they're like, and here comes Tyler Reddick. And like, yeah, he's been coming for a while now. So it's that's what made it exciting as well.
That's the one thing I hope they did a good job on the broadcast of highlighting, is that there were some cars like Reddick and Ty who were on slick tires, because I'm not sure in person, if you were watching that race on the track, you could pick that up, because I didn't know that Reddick was on slick tires until 2 to go. It's like, whoa. That 8-second lead that Bowman had is now cut to 2.
Before we wrap up, I definitely we got to talk about Alex Bowman.
I was about to say, like,
win, right?
He just punched his ticket. Like,
he did
80 races he hadn't won or something like that.
Right. And certainly you're going to see some negative people talk about, well, it was fluky because of the strategy. Let me just clue you guys in. Alex Bowman was hauling ass in practice as well in the complete dry. He was going to be part of the picture regardless of the conditions. I raced with him last year at that track, and actually I think I spun him in turn 11. And he was fast. He was one of the fastest cars last year. It really didn't get to show it. I think he blew up. And then this year, I thought he had one of the fastest cars again in practice. Now, not the fastest, but I think there's a difference in having speed in practice and then having racecraft to then go up and contend. And I thought Alex was very underrated in the sense of not enough people were talking about his potential to win this race. And what I saw in practice is that car and driver had a potential to go out there and finish really, really well, no matter what the conditions. And so I think it's very well deserved. Everyone has stories in their own race teams of, races that could have slipped away from them. I don't know how many opportunities the 48 had legitimate shots this season that they were a race-winning car. None of them come to mind really quickly, but this was a earned win in the sense of he drove a great race. He did what it took to win. The crew chief did what he thought he needed to do for the right strategy to win, and Alex executed. So you got to give him credit, and I think he was in the. It didn't move the cut line, but it did move another driver that was. He wasn't really borderline on points, but like if he had a streak like I've had over the last 5 races of terrible finishes, he would find himself on the bubble. So it adds another race winner and another long winless streak broken.
Yeah, Bowman finished. Well, he scored 6 stage points stage 1 he finished 6th, stage 2 he finished 2nd, and then won the race.
Right,
so he was in the picture throughout the day.
So he was 6th in stage 1. Well, there was no alternate strategies that played out in stage 1, right? We just all
a couple people had stayed on slicks or wets, but that's about it.
Correct, but there was no short pitting. There was
Correct.
not. The reason we got 1 stage point in stage 2 is because everyone in front of us pit, except for 9 cars. So, he was going to be in contention no matter what. I would have loved to seen how that last half lap was going to play out with him and Reddick. I mean, there was always a chance that neither one of them win because they both end up wrecked. But still, I know it was a big win for him. Blake Harris, his first win as a crew chief. Fantastic all the way around.
I wonder how hungover he is right now.
Yeah, you're seeing pictures on social media that they pulled an all-nighter. So it's good. You're really happy for teams like that, drivers like that are working really hard and they're fighting for their spot in the team, right? I don't think that no one's been completely quiet about the whispers of, man, Alex is not running where his teammates are running, but he outran them this week. So
Alex Bowman did something you haven't been able to do yet, Denny, and give your new dog a victory. He adopted a dog last week, and
my dog's bad luck. Lulu is bad luck. You can't argue the records.
Yeah,
we're on a 5-race skid after having
Ever
having 5 top 5s in a row. I mean, we're on a slide. We got to give that damn dog away.
Meanwhile, Bowman and Huck are 1-0.
Oh, he got the dog this week?
Yeah. Went and picked it up on Tuesday.
Oh, man. Lucky dog.
Hey, one thing I got to, before we wrap up here, give a quick shout out to you guys and thank you all for the little birthday celebration you threw for me. But I think the fans will find it cool because I kind of find it cool in this respect is that the second part of this night, when I met you guys at Rabbit or whatever the club
Bandit.
was. Bandit.
Same thing.
Similar names. I walk in there and there's like the Denny crew. There's Denny, Austin, Charlie, and then there's also JP and Colby.
The Larson crew.
And Tyler Mon. Yeah, and the Larson crew. I was like, wow, I'm bringing these two families together.
I know, right? Yeah, you bring the whole. Hey, by the way, you can remove the tape now.
Yeah,
if you
I
want.
just wanted to make sure people. I don't know if Travis posted the clip last week.
I thought you were going to post it.
Did you send it to me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, my bad then.
You can take the tape off. I know you want to be a
sticker comes
big
with it.
supporter.
There
There
we go.
You do have
Still
to
need
change.
500.
It's still 500.
Nonetheless.
But yeah. Hey, I don't mind talking it out over a few beverages here and there. Yeah, it's all good.
Yeah,
so
that's
Jared's bringing the people together.
Trying to squash some
30th birthday coming up this week, right?
this weekend. Yeah.
Man, I can tell you 30's fine. Once you hit 40, down you go.
Well, see, that's what people are saying about 30. Like once you
No, 30's easy.
No. Yeah. 30's nothing. I could do a lot of things at 30 I can't do now at 40. So, all right. Well, man, going Pocono. There's
Good
no
place
wet,
to stop the skid.
There's no wet weather tires at Pocono. And there's no wet weather tires coming at Indy. These next 2 weeks, it's on, baby. It's on.